Welcome to another episode of the Healers of the World podcast with your host, Robyn on Earth. Once upon a time, we didn't question initiation. It was the air that a culture breathed. Tribes had rites, mysteries had thresholds. You knew when you were crossing from one life into another. You were guided, stripped down, remade. But now, we live in a world that, for the most part, has abandoned that threshold. Yes, we've got birthdays, degrees, weddings, ceremonies that celebrate status, but they don't really celebrate transformation. And yet, the hunger persists. The soul craves a fire to walk through, a death to endure, a rebirth to claim. So, what do? We invent it. We become the priest, the priestess, and the pilgrim. We walk into the wilderness alone and we name it holy. And here's the truth: no one is coming to save us. No one is coming to crown us. And if we really believe that we are the ones that we are waiting for, why wouldn't we take self-initiation more seriously? Our becoming is our responsibility. And that raises this question: can we truly initiate ourselves? And if so, what are the dangers or the shadows that come with this? And something that really fascinates me too: what kind of initiations are individuals going through in their process of individuation? Initiation was once communal, it was the law of the tribe. But in our modern day, we have lost so many traditional and ancient systems and live in a patriarchal age so obsessed with conformity and external authority. And initiation feels more urgent than ever. And so the question today: is self initiation possibly an antidote to the council of elders that are lacking in most of our lives? Initiation is, after all, a mythic pattern. The heroine or the hero's journey is the ultimate initiation template. And so that's what we're exploring today. I'm really, really excited, guys, about my guest today. Mishka Eleine is a multidimensional wisdom keeper who is birthing ascension keys on this planet at this time. And she is very well versed in self initiation. I first connected with Mishka over dragons, and perhaps that story will weave its way into our conversation today. With a spiritual background in plant medicine, ceremony facilitation, shamanism, sound and vibration medicine, flower consciousness, higher realm channeling, and energy healing, Mishka brings forward a diverse spiritual understanding, and I'm so excited that we get to explore this with her today. She is the founder of the Psychedelic Society of South Africa and has been a voice, a leader, and an anchor for the New Earth community structures that are rooted in remembrance and reconnection to Source. With degrees in engineering and psychology and various spiritual and shamanic initiations behind her name and multiple business ventures, she roots firmly into both the heavens and the earth. My kind of girl. So, welcome, Mishka. It is so awesome to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. So, I'd love to dive right in. There's so much that today has the potential to bring forward. We've already touched base on a few things behind the screen, so to speak. I would love to hear about your journey of awakening, Mishka. And I'm sure that it's multifaceted and it probably doesn't have a precise beginning and ending. But whatever you feel called to share today, we would love to know what the call to spirit felt like, what the transitions were like, and perhaps just some of the guides and the guardians that you've worked with along the way.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, it's such a big question in terms of when do these things really happen? Because I think as we start looking at our history over time, and as we know, history can be so changing based on the perception that we're looking through. I can start finding things earlier and earlier in my life. I'll
Mm,
speak about some of the transition points and the big milestones that I reached, which were very profound moments where I knew that I'd stepped into something greater, and you can call that like the threshold of a certain type of initiation. Especially my ones that really came into being directly introduced to spirit and more like in a visual communicative form. But yeah, if I heard my mother saying sometimes that when I was really young, she used to see me in the garden waving around a little wand and talking to the air, by myself. Um, and so I really wonder, because I don't fully remember those days, what I was doing. Um, but for me, coming into adulthood, I had a quite a normal, upbringing and consciousness of I was always very bright, very open, very interested in philosophy and consciousness in general. But by no means was I someone that grew up talking to spirits constantly, not at least within my conscious awareness. For me, it really was a process of initiation once I had become an adult, really. Um,
Mm.
which for me is an interesting path. And many people say, oh, I wish I was like you. I wish I had this all the time. And for me, it's saying no, no, it's not something that I was necessarily. I didn't come fitted with it necessarily from the beginning, at least not consciously. It's something that I had to work and develop over time, and develop these skills of opening up to these higher realms, at least to the capacity with which I do now, which is quite openly and fluidly. So for me, there was a really big turning point when it came to working with psychedelics. As many people, I think, in the spiritual space, it is a gateway for us to open these channels up in a fast way, or at least come into a fast level of remembrance that something else is there. And for me, it was the same. I'd worked with psychedelics for many years, and I've spoken on various other podcasts about that part of my journey. In this podcast, I'd really like to focus just on the opening into the spirit realms. And even though I'd been working with psychedelics for years, and I'd had lots of insights, lots of deep experiences, there was a there was definitely a moment in which I really deepened, and the experience became something else, really something beyond just the journey itself. And I'd really hit a place in my life where I'd been really humbled. I'd at some stage I was a drug dealer, and I got completely humbled by that path and realized it wasn't the way for me, and really hit rock bottom in many ways. Financially, I'd moved back in with my mom, which was really beautiful, but also not great at that age. And Yeah, I just got to a place where I was so empty. I realized I really didn't know anything. I was like, look, I'm humbled, I'm empty, I'm here to learn, because really I clearly not done things the way that I thought I would. And that was a place in which I think I was really ready to receive something new. And so I did a journey there for the first time in darkness, 5 grams, with that level of intention. It wasn't just for introspection, it was really like, I'm ready to really dive in. And I got exactly what I asked for, in a sense. And it also taught me a lot about going in with the right level of humility and intention. And I went into the journey, and on the other side of the journey, I had a group of spirits that arrived, and they said to me that a couple things had been balanced in my body, and one of it was power, and the other one was fear. And so essentially, they showed me the human race on a petri dish. I don't know if anyone who's done science, you get these little dishes that you grow bacteria in. Or when I was growing mushrooms in the past, and so I knew these dishes from there. And they showed me the human race, and they said that sometimes we have a healthy culture, and some cultures turn toxic. So understanding that sometimes you need to be able to balance that. And they say you're basically on one of these dishes, and for us to be able to interact with you and take you off the dish, you have to balance power or fear. Because in a culture, if you power dominant, if we put you into a new space, you're going to eat over everything else that you encounter. And so it's not actually healthy to move you into other environments. And if you have a lot of fear, you're going to crumple and like diminish yourself, because you can't actually balance yourself in that conversation. And in terms of the ability of your psyche to engage with us, we can't talk to you if you're going to be too fearful, because then we're going to damage you ultimately. And it's for your own benefit, this communication. And if you have power, it's not going to go well as well. So they said to me, you've balanced this within your psyche to a point that we can now start talking to you. I was like, whoa, because I'd had things here and there, visions and insights and things, but not to this degree where I was literally sat down at a table, and was being spoken to. And that for me was the first time that I felt, something was really there. And they explained a lot to me in that journey. They showed me a lot of humanity. I was taken into a room which I later understood was looking through Akashic records, and it was quite overwhelming initially, just because it was so much to take in. And coming back from the journey, I remember crying because it felt like I missed my friends, is what it felt like. Because it felt like I spent a really long time there and that I knew them so super well. And I'd finally remembered them and I was grieving them. And obviously, in this reality, I was only really in that part of the journey for about 20 minutes. So the time dilation was just totally, totally how it can be. And for me, that was the starting point. A lot of things came through there as well in terms of like, mission for humanity needing to help, psychedelic society needing to be birthed, and a whole lot of things that started unfolding and are still unpacking in my life today. But that was a strong turning point. And for me, I've had several ones as well. Another really big one on the journey was I had another low dose journey actually, I'd say probably a year later, or maybe even slightly less, at a friend's house. It was his birthday, and we'd taken a small dose of mushrooms, and I'd just come on to automatic writing. And so I thought, let me try. And so I was sitting on the couch by myself, and I decided to just do some. And what came out was that I needed to go into the garden and look up. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm getting instructions to this automatic writing. And so I decided to go into the garden, and I looked up and I saw a star. And suddenly the star became super bright, and I started being able to hear words coming from the star. And it was, for the first time I realized, wow, I feel like I'm communicating with something. I felt like something was going to materialize next to me, and I completely freaked out until I felt that energy going away. And that I felt was a nervous system test to see if I was ready for something like that. And because I think we are also at different levels of like, and you think you're ready to have something materialize in your home, but it's like, actually, no, that's a little bit too far. So I had the auditory come online, and I was talking to the star. And the moment that I realized I was communicating with something else was they asked me like, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know, I'm here with my friend. And like, what do you say when you have a star talking to you, right? And the response I kind of got when I asked, like, do you have friends? I didn't know what to ask, to be honest. And was we don't have friends, we just have each other. And that response was so interesting and so far outside of anything that my mind would necessarily come up with, that I really felt like, wow, okay, like what am I interacting with? And the dialogue went on a little bit more with really interesting answers that came up from that communication. And one of the things I got invited to was to recreate connection in a sober state the following Friday and every Friday going forward. And that was a big moment, and I wrote it down. And after the journey, I went back to my book and saw this and felt like, okay, I'm going to try. And so for the next year, every Friday, I sat in meditation as I was instructed, and I tuned in. And at first, I used to just get really huge headaches, and I didn't know what I was doing. There's no guide to guide me into what I'm kind of sitting there thinking I'm going a little bit crazy, but I was trying anyway. And eventually things started to come through. I started to get insights. I started writing the insights down. Then it became dialogues. And then at one stage, I asked you if I could see visually something, and I did, but it gave me also a bit of a headache. But the channel started opening more and more. And every week I would get more and more interesting information that was actually teaching me quite a lot about how reality worked, and also just information that I wouldn't necessarily construct in my own way of thinking. And at that stage, then I realized that I actually get to ask who I'm communicating with, which actually took me a while. And I often tell people when they're engaging with spirits as well, I was like, have you asked who you're talking to? And people are like, wait, I'm allowed to do that? It's like, yes, you're allowed to ask. And often you get the answer. So I did, and I started asking, and I had people would probably know some of them as like the Pleiadians. I had them for a while as teachers. Actuarians, I had Actuarians as well. There was one being which came from Andromeda as well, which I was also really interesting. It was the only being that I engaged with where it was purely interest and conversational. They weren't here to like teach me big things. It was like talking. You can think of it like a pen pal from another country. And I remember one of the questions that they asked me, it was so sweet and innocent. It was like, why do you call it iced tea if it has nothing to do with ice? And I thought, my heart, like this interdimensional alien is asking me this really sweet question. And yeah, so I learned lots through that time channeling different beings. And after the ascended masters, at some stage I had insights around my guides being changed after about a year. And I went through working with, in the same format, ascended masters came through. And then over time, more beings started coming in. I had another very strong experience as well. As my intuition and my energy started opening, and I started expanding and became more normalized. I didn't have to go into meditation any longer to receive information. It just started happening happenstance. I had another incredibly powerful rebirth experience in 2022, on September 22nd, 2022. And I had another being shift in, and one other soul part that was bigger than my normal expansion shift in by the name of Elaine, and or Elena, which is like a Elohim name, and came through the Elven Kingdom. And that was, yeah, incredibly difficult and powerful, and that's something we can always go into later. But I then started being able to communicate with plants more fluidly, and
Mm.
flowers. Flower consciousness came in, and yeah, it's been evolving ever since. The last 2 years I've been working with a lot of deities, beings like Kali, Egyptian, lords of karma, such as Thoth, Anubis, embodying parts of that. And yeah, it's it's an ongoing process for me. Once that door kind of opened initially, it's been just a rolling expansion of life. Yeah, I
Mm.
guess that's the long answer.
That's beautiful. I really appreciate how honest you've been too, because um, when we take any kind of grandiosity around where we've started or where we've come from, it makes this so much more relatable. Because, as you say, it for those of us that weren't born psychic or weren't born into the spiritual family, so to speak, who felt that our upbringings were very mundane. I believe that it can imprint a belief system that we're not capable of such experiences. And I really believe there's so much value, therefore, in hearing these stories. So I really appreciate that. And that your example of the Petri dish is just amazing because something that I've actually been going through in the last 2 years that my guides have been impressing on me is that something they keep telling me is that when I was a child, I blocked my psychic perceptions, right? And so now I'm like, it's like so close. I feel like I can touch it and I'm aware of it being blocked, but I want to unblock it. And the message that they keep giving me is that there is a certain degree of transgenerational fear that needs to be cleared so that the experiences don't actually harm me. And so, what you were sharing or how they illustrated that with the Petri dish culture is just, it's so striking and so visceral for me. I really hear that. And I'm going to keep that example and definitely contemplate on that. It's really beautiful. And then I also have to say that I love what you've shared about the humility too, because Mishka, that's been my experience that um, humility is one of the keys that opens the doors. And I do believe that it's one of the reasons why our souls take us through initiation and enduring times or times of hardship, because it creates the necessary humility. It helps us heal and ground the programs of I am special so that we can go into these experiences with soul rather than ego. I mean, that's been my experience. I've watched what's happened after I've been taken to my knees of like, I don't know anything and I'm actually not special and I'm not any more important than anyone else here. Um, so yeah, and just working with the mushroom too, particularly with journeys. Yeah, I really vouch for that too. Has been my experience that the energy that I'm going into the journey with and the story that I'm telling the mushrooms before I actually consume them is some of the most important setting of the journey and has been my experience. So, yeah. So, Mishka, I'd love to hear. I mean, what comes up for you then on self initiation of these times? And, just the container of self initiation. I mean, meeting others who've been through these experiences, kind of advice you've had for other people, potential pitfalls. Yeah, I'd love to just hear some more of the um, yeah, just your experiences around sharing this with others or others who might be facing this.
Yeah, so for me, it's a really important topic because I feel more and more people are starting to experience similar things, to all varied degrees, some as clear and robust as what I've been explaining, and some on subtler forms as well. And I don't think there are many tools available for people to really understand how to navigate these experiences. So for me, because I work with such a breadth of people, and I have people that come and they're talking to one's going through ancestral initiation, and the other one's going through flower consciousness, and it's all these different realms that we could touch on, that are beings that are non-corporeal, don't have bodies necessarily. And I can also speak to, when you do attract guides that are actually physical, because that's also a reality that many people do have, which is lovely if you have a guide that comes to you in the physical. But for the times in which you're by yourself navigating this internal plane, wondering, am I going crazy? How do I navigate through this? The best thing for me is it's a tracking quote, and I think it goes something along the lines of, I don't know where I'm going, but I know how to get there. And that's the just. And for me, it's understanding the tools and the soft skills that you need to be able to navigate these situations with ease and grace, and how to step forward and yeah, work through the embodiment. And so for me, when it comes to intuition training, being able to actually discern, like, where's this information coming from, so that you can receive more clearly, understanding what channels you work through, whether it's auditory, understanding how to, for example, reading with cards was a really big part of my journey through these initiations, especially when the mind is starting to become a bit scattered and you're like hearing things and you're like unsure what's going on. To have something in the physical that can help you verify what you're receiving. Some people choose to work with a pendulum or something that is a grounded, tangible tool that can allow you to see physically what's going on, was super powerful for me. Being able to like hear something, feel something, and then go to a deck of cards and pull three cards that are basically identical from three different decks. I was like, okay, there's no doubt that I'm experiencing this, especially in a world where we're not surrounded with people. Like, this is great for us to have this conversation because we've both had similar experiences, and we're like, here's another human being that's had the same genuine experience. And as much as I've been a pattern break for many people because I've been that person that's having experiences that they've had, for many people they don't have the privilege of that. It's a very individual path. It's a very individual thing they're going through, and they aren't always that many good resources online, or in books to really find practical, advice for the exact situation they're going through. So for me, it's about that self check-in process. It is also really nice for self initiation to have people that can be there to support you. They don't necessarily need to understand the nitty gritty of it. I mean, of course, if you have someone that has that's also great. But who can be there just as a sounding board for you to process some of these things in a non-shameful space. I think is really, really important one. I've had some really beautiful experiences, and sometimes the information I got after channeling sessions was kind of weird, sounded kind of dumb, but it was just nice to have at least my partner or someone there who I can just say, okay, well, this is what came through, and this is what I received, and that's okay. I find it for people that are also opening their light language channels. There's also a period of time when it's kind of weird, and you're like, am I just making noises? And you need that safe space just to be able to start opening the channels up and getting reflection. And for me, that's really important down the line. I'm really grateful for the friends that I had that, even though I sounded a bit crazy, they heard me out back then when things were first happening. Because now that things are like much more refined and detailed, and like I'm much more clear in my my power when it comes to the spirit realm, I've got those friends that have been there from the start, that have heard some of my tales, and now they understand the narrative and the arcs. And when another being comes back, it's essentially because you're stepping into a new world, and you can think of it almost like a game in a sense. You're like world building, and sometimes to create that world structure and be able to navigate in it with grace, it's nice to have sometimes allies on the path who can at least understand your world, even if it's fantasy to them initially. So for me, those are some of the things that I think are really important, especially for I'll say the really gnarly initiations. I've had a couple that have been really, really brutal, really on the upper end. And I mentioned the one, with a kind of rebirth experience. And part of that experience is I basically, for a couple of days, I became an infant in an adult's body, which was fascinating in its own way, but I actually needed physical care because I was an infant elf essentially in a human body. And for someone that's like never stepped into this realm before, or like hasn't heard at least some of my crazy stories, that would have been like psychiatric ward, And so
Yeah.
I'm really grateful to know that, at least, and also knowing that I can trust myself in that. because in that space I'd already been to so many initiations in this like vessel, that there was already inbuilt training and guides that were there to hold the process, and I was in full trust with that, even though it was terrifying, because they of course would align me to the exact people that needed to go to such a degree. I'll use one example, and this is where that trust in your guides is really important, knowing that you have these big beings that are there as allies. I remember being in an Uber car, and I remember speaking on the phone, and I was like basically like this 12-year-old elf that was now growing into I was aging very quickly, and I was crying on the phone and talking and explaining myself. But then after the drive, I realized this Uber driver must think that I'm literally insane, And what had happened is, as I got out the car, um, my backpack fell, and somehow my vitamin bottle fell out of my bag and dropped tablets all over the back seat. So it literally looked like this crazy woman had dropped all her tablets, and I had to like pick up all the tablets. But I thought, how perfect is that? And this guy just looked at me like, oh, like, wow, you like. And for his reality, that was the perfect thing that needed to happen. And even though they were just like vitamin C or something, it created this story that was acceptable for the situation that I was in. And in a way, I knew exactly that my guides were protecting me, that you're fine, you're going to be fine. And that he knows that you're medicated. At least his story is contained and your story is contained in a sense. Um, and yeah, I mean, I've had some really early ones. So for me, it's allies on the path. It's knowing that, it's also trusting that you're not going insane and that you can move through this. Getting tools for you to reflect back, journaling, getting things that you have a feedback system in yourself. And I mean, it's a huge topic. I think we could probably,
Yeah.
self-initiation and the tools that are required. And discernment for me is the other one, which at least at the beginning stages, as you go through it, there's more complicated things. But for the get-go, learning discernment on your intuition channel is a really strong one for most people that I've met that are starting out. So discerning what is coming through and like how to sift through it, and also understanding your own inner authority. So one of the first things that I learned at the beginning of this path, when I was still opening up to all the spiritual, and I did an ayahuasca journey. It was my first one. It was actually quite traumatic for me, if I'm being honest, because I got put into a very, very difficult container that taught me very quickly what I needed to know, because I was starting to encounter spirits at a very fast rate. And I basically got put into a hell realm where I was being basically like tortured. I got told that I needed to rip out my eyes and my hair for me to transcend this form to break into the next realm. And I was literally there trying to work myself up to rip my eyes out. It was the most terrifying experience. And I was literally, my whole body was sweating. I was in deep agony. And I basically, yeah, that was like the only way forward. And I kept feeling this part of me that was like, no, like I can't rip my physical form apart. I can't do it. And eventually I was like, I can't. And I called out for help, and then, the shaman, or a friend of mine came, and he started like, just kind of waving over me and calming my system down, and gave me the best advice ever, which was to focus on the heart and breathe through the nose. Simple, but very effective. But it taught me a lot. And the lesson that landed from that was, it doesn't matter who it's coming from. It could be the greatest spirit in the whole world. It could be God himself. If a message comes through that doesn't feel right to your internal landscape, you are the ultimate discerning principle. You make that decision at the end of the day. And that was a really hard way to learn it. I wish I could have learned it in a gentler way, but I got it very quickly, which was very good. And it's ready to go to that. It's like, it doesn't, it's like almost like it felt like being put under like, kind of like, when they like put bags over people's heads and they torture them and like check.
Yeah.
It kind of felt like that for me, like that level of like checking where I'm at. Like, can I hold my inner compass even in the most extreme conditions?
Yeah.
And the lesson that I wish to deliver with a lot less pain, I'd say, is that you are your ultimate authority, and is to always remember that no matter what message comes through. And that is the discerning channel, is if there's something that feels off in your body when a message comes through, listen to that off thing, because it holds a message for you around what is being received. And sit with that, because that will be the guiding force. And sometimes the lessons can be tricky. They might come through and you might think it's one thing, but there's actually something hidden underneath, and your tension points and resistances will help you find that. So yeah, it's like warrior training for the mind that helps you progress as you go up into different levels of consciousness and encounter, yeah, bigger and more demanding beings.
Mm. So I
Yeah.
have so many just points I want to add to, but I actually have a question. I'm going to loop back to a few things because um, it's a philosophical question on these are initiations, and so we're undergoing training. And I couldn't agree with you more around the embodiment and the discernment that's required, because I do feel that one of the pitfalls or the shadows that one needs to watch out with self initiation is a form of narcissism. And I feel that the counterbalance to that is to always make sure that we are initiating into becoming better people or better warriors of service. So is the formation of self for a greater good, or is it just for one's own good? And I feel like that's always a good benchmark, for ourselves and our community to hold us through as we move through these initiations. But my philosophical question is, how many instances do you feel that when we encounter beings that require our discernment, so less benevolent beings, you know, where is the boundary between that being training and that just being the laws of the universe, if my question makes sense?
Can you phrase that again, just so I'm understanding? Are you asking? Yeah, can you rephrase that?
Yes, sure. So, my philosophical question here is, obviously we're undergoing training, and, this is what initiation is all about. It's the process of becoming sovereign. And some of these experiences that we have, I believe, are actually orchestrated by those who have our best interest at heart. So, our guides, our higher self, right? Put us into challenging situations where we are taught the experience of the consequence of not discerning, of not holding a sovereign channel. But where is the line between that being something that is orchestrated for our highest good or a situation where we're actually in danger? And I just wonder if you have any experience to talk to that.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, to be honest with you, I guess I'm in the same position as you, where I'd really like to know, because I've
Yeah.
really had situations in which I'm like, wow, was that was that necessary? And for me, it's all part of it, So I've had some things that I've had entity extractions before. I'll speak into that maybe, where you can always say, I've had this lens for a while around every being is just at a different point on the path, and there's no being that's good or bad necessarily. It's just levels of desire and ignorance that are bundled in different formations that result in things that we don't like or that are harmful to us or helpful to us at that moment in time. And it's about understanding that. And it's interesting because when we're doing parts work, for example, there's different lenses we can look through. And I'll just speak through the one where we're looking at internal part systems, where even demon can sometimes be an internalized part that has been suppressed. And for
Yeah.
me, that's an interesting space to be in because a lot of the time there've been things that I've been trying to banish or exile outside because I think they're trying to attack me. But meanwhile, they're actually a part of self that's
Yeah.
been so suppressed, they've become this demon in a sense. And you look at archetypal stories like Lilith, for example, who was this first woman that left, the Garden of Eden, and then was kind of like became this demonized being, this outcast. And so I'm cautious not to demonize things unnecessarily. Although I also do believe that there are spaces in which defense is necessary. In where something just maybe hasn't learned, for example, power, for example. Where you have something that comes into the system and it just dominates. Just before this call, we were speaking also like the topic of like parasites, for example. It's like they just want to exist. They're not like, oh, we want to like take, I mean, maybe, but I think for the most part, they're just like trying to do their thing. But they don't understand that power balance. And so they just take and take and take, and they actually can like ruin the whole system, or break the whole system just through that unchecked part of them that hasn't been developed or matured yet. And so I think for me, it's being able to be and encounter beings of your own size with the same direction as you, and knowing the discernment if something is not for you or is for you, I think is quite important. And so I have had times in which there have been things that have come into my awareness that have tried to manipulate for their own gain. We can talk about things like not a NPC, like a non-playable character. And I think a lot of us that are like quite spiritually open can sometimes be very playable characters. In fact, many things want to play this character because we are these embodiments in physical form that have, great power and authority and sovereignty. So it's kind of like, yeah, if a spirit can come in and can use some of that embodiment, that would be fantastic. So there is a level of like sovereignty and discernment to make sure that things are not coming in to try and manipulate and take over. And sometimes they can be very sneaky. I've had things that have disguised themselves as memories or disguised themselves as a voice from certain people in my life. I've also witnessed other people go through experiences where they have had, some have even had my voice come to them. And sometimes it is part of like my high self communicating, but sometimes it's manipulation that comes through a trusted form to get trust so that you can accept it, or a belief system that's trying to rework itself way into your system that comes through a voice which is trusting so it can stabilize. So there's things that we have to kind of learn to cut out and carve out and be like, wait, what is this? And really inspect. And I have had times in which my system has been incredibly weak, and that was actually related to the dragon story where I had to go for a removal. I had things that were bothering me in my dreams and attacking me, and but the interesting thing there was that for me was part of, because I have had times when I'm like, okay, I have these almighty powerful guides. Why can't they just like protect me? And for the most part, I actually am very protected, which is fantastic, and I'm very, very grateful. But and I wondered in the time in which I had to go for this extraction, like why am I not able to battle this? It's too strong for me. And there was so much that I learned in that experience. It was humility, it was asking for help, it was understanding a whole new process of how someone uses prayer as a modality to separate things out, how they look through the psyche. So the whole process was basically like a strong guidance to being able to see how that played out. But I essentially needed to be attacked in order, or left open to attack, for something like that to unfold. So sometimes there is a deeper purpose, there is a
Yeah.
deeper plan, and sometimes the healing is the lesson. Sometimes as a healer, I say often, like, if I encounter something in myself that I don't just instantly heal because I understand the root cause, one, it's kind of humbling, especially to my ego, but also two, sometimes like I've asked beings that I've encountered, can you tell me about this aspect of my being? And they were like, no, we're not actually sanctioned to tell you because you have to go through the life path of it. And in the process that you go through, the lessons will unpack, and you'll understand the cycle, and it's important for you. And so
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
That's my kind of more fleshed out answer without giving anything that's too binary.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you've just listening to you, what I've landed on too is that we wouldn't be trained to need this level of discernment if we didn't need this level of discernment. And I feel that in a way that also answers the question as to the
Mm,
potential of what we could encounter by being so open. So, yeah. Um, also listening to you talk about your experiences with self initiation, what I feel called to share is that I work a lot with my clients with the void. It's something that I just end up helping people a lot with navigating the void, and it's something that I am frustratingly well equipped to deal with, having spent a lot of time there myself. And one of my favorite lines of a poem written by Saint John the Mystic. He wrote this in the 16th century when he was trying to discern if he was actually depressed or if he was going through some kind of a spiritual initiation. So he wrote this poem called The Dark Night of the Soul. And one of the lines in that poem is to know that the path that you are walking is true. You are required to walk the path in the dark, or to know that the path that you are on is real. You must walk it in the dark. And ultimately, that's what all of this self initiation or chosen initiation, prescribed initiation is around, is sovereignty, and embodying that sovereignty, that inner knowing of what feels right and what feels wrong. And so, just in all my experiences, I take that knowing with me, that line with me, that um, the reason why I might have felt so certain at one point in the spiral and so lost in the next point of the spiral is that the path is deepening. And
mm,
as new gifts or tools or technology are coming online from the initiation, I'm thrown into a deeper place of training to navigate and to learn to discern. So, that really just struck me listening to your thoughts on the self initiation. And one other thing that I thought of listening to you is you reminded me of a time when I was like on my knees, Mishka, like praying, 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 like, please, like, deliver me the teacher. I'd really love a teacher. I'd love a teacher. Like, where is my teacher? And the initiation and the self initiation was only getting more and more intense. And also listening to you, I now recognize something that I wasn't able to recognize at that time. And I just wonder, I'm sharing this because it might be a hallmark for many others navigating this path, which is, the whole intention of sharing conversations like this is that maybe it is the hallmark of a point in one's journey where one is going to start having spirit-led or self-led initiation when the physical teachers stop appearing.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's such a big one. Just on what you were saying before as well, there's another quote as well. It's like, if you can see the path, it's not yours.
Yeah.
And another one is also someone said to me as a way shower, often if you're showing the way, you're the one that's finding the way. So you
Mm.
can't find what's already been found. So of course you're going to be going ahead with your own little flashlight of consciousness in the dark, looking for the way. So I hear you on those things, and I resonate with that. Um, yeah, I've lost my train of thought.
So
Where was
I,
I?
I would love then, I feel like that's the perfect pause for the dragons because I'm sure that our listeners would love to hear a little bit more about this. And even if they
Mm,
don't, I'd like to talk about it
yeah.
because, yeah, my most of my psychedelic experiences or most of my experiences with the mushroom have been on hero warrior doses in the dark. And the very first time I sat with 5 grams, it was a albino penis envy, so it was a good 5 grams. Um, as I went into the space, I just kept seeing embryos of dragons and had a very visceral experience at the end of that journey, coming face to face with the dragon. And then that was just every time I went into the mushrooms, this is what started happening. Like I was literally birthing balls of light. Like sometimes I was actually like I looked like a woman in labor, with like my legs apart, and I could see this ball of consciousness, this ball of light moving through me, and have also had terrifying, I mean, probably one of the most terrifying experiences of my life was in
Mm,
Ireland, coming face to face with a dragon on a dose of wild mushrooms there. And so that's actually what connected me to you because it was just kind of something. And I bring this up because I think that this is what can happen with self-led initiation is we go through these experiences and we almost don't give the experiences the meaning that they deserve because for in my case it just wasn't the community where I was talking about these things or I wasn't hearing people talking about birthing dragons. And so almost wasn't fully rooting into the great privilege of these experiences that I was having. And I started scrolling on Instagram, and there you were. I felt very bravely talking about your experiences of birthing dragons, which I would understand as, the dragons are consciousness. I mean, the dragons are real as well. I've been in dimensions where um, the experience where I came face to face with the dragon, I was so deep in that experience, in that dimension, I could no longer think in English, which is a lot more terrifying than it sounds. Like I was so deep in dragon speak, I didn't even understand what I was thinking anymore. Um, but yeah, I would love to hear your experiences with the dragons if you feel called to share, Mishka.
yeah, dragons, hey. Um, yeah, it's been an interesting journey with me and dragons and all the experiences that I've had over time, which have been interesting and fleeting and somehow all connected in a way. I remember having one strong experience. This is like way before I ended up birthing one, which I didn't even think was like remotely possible for a consciousness of that size to pass through a human level consciousness. but it happened and it was terrifying and very horrible. But and I'll speak more into it. Um, but I remember I did a meditation one day. I was sitting with Hape and I was just in bed and I suddenly went into this like deeper vision. I think this was close to when I did a Sananga dieta, and I went into this vision and I suddenly saw myself as a young man. I was Spanish and I'd been traveling through the world towards Asia. And because I had a dream and I knew that I had to leave and I had to follow this path, and I ended up at this temple, and I remember coming out of this vision like crying as well because I remembered my master. I met this man and he became like my teacher, and it was basically a place of dragons. And I remember him walking with a stick and hitting me behind my feet, like as I was walking. And I remember it so clearly, and I remember his stick. Um, and even now it brings up a certain level of emotion. And we were working, and the dragons there at that stage were, I remember communicating with them, and they worked with telepathy as well, so I could hear them and I could converse with them, and they were all in a sense like, we were in the same band at that stage though, so they were also physical. I was in the same physical density as them. And I remember my master, and he was the master of the temple, died. And that was really devastating. And knowing, but in that understanding, the new master would be born and would be called. And then for a while, I was wondering, like, do I have to take over? And I remember the dragons actually letting me know that no, it's not me. And that was like, it was actually like quite a big relief because I had no idea. And they were like, no, the next master will be born with that knowledge to come in. Like, we're very grateful for you, but like the new master will be born and will come. Um, and so yeah, so I was very, yeah, it was a really beautiful thing. And I remember coming out of that, and I remember having some doubts around like the experience itself, and like wondering like what yeah, like was this experience something really true? And I remember getting the insight to actually Google this temple, and I was like, what's the chances are that I could do this? And I actually Googled it, and turns out it actually exists. you know So, and it's called Angkor Wat. It's not even a little one. It's like one of the main temples in the world. And I saw the image of it and I was like, whoa, okay. And I recognized, yeah, and yeah. I mean, it's like, I think it's one of the wonders of the world. It's one of those big, yeah, it's really beautiful. But I remember the moment I saw it, I was like, wait a second, this is insane. And before that, I had never heard of it in my life, I was being quite honest. And so that was like one of the first, I'd say, strong experiences that I had where I felt the sudden like deep connection and remembrance with the dragons. And before that, I'd had meditations and I had dreams as well. And I got given symbols to access dragon realms and dream state and got insights there as well. And I started understanding more about dragon consciousness a couple of years before COVID, actually, when there was a period in which quite a few people had suddenly died, but all very powerful, energetic people. And I had this insight that the dragons were birthing, but essentially a dragon, if you think of consciousness size, is like you can think of a dragon as like 100,000 consciousness of human consciousness, like equivalent. And so it's almost like with energy in the universe, it's never like, it just transfers into form. So in a sense, we had this like pulling of consciousness that was then birthing into a new consciousness. I'm just going to take my earphones out. So they're dying. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. And so
Yeah.
I could understand this like consciousness formation that was then shifting. And yeah, for me, it's always been these little tidbits of understanding here and there. And encountering I had some dragons that were flanking me as well in the energetic space, and I could see how they were moving through reality as well because they're so multidimensional. They also have guardian dragons on the earth as well that come in, and when they move through time and space, they affect the whole structure. And so in our physical reality, we see that playing out in different patterns. And so, yeah, this eventually then led to the experience of me birthing a dragon, which I had a journey in which a couple times in my life, I've had things implanted into my womb by different beings. And
sometimes I'm like, am I consenting to this? What is going on? And there's been times when I welcomed it, not realizing what I was like really consenting to, in a sense. I remember this golden egg being put into me, and months later I then went through this whole process, and when this thing finally came out of me, I was like, oh wow, that was that egg that went in a while ago, you know, because I also got given the name as a mother of the new earth, so I'm a multidimensional birther, and that's like a whole other journey to discuss even what that even means, and I'm still discovering it. But with this specific experience, it basically ripped my consciousness to parts, you know, coming through, and you know, everything is related to everything in a sense. So it started becoming things related to carving patterns and ancestral patterns, and working with the earth grids of war at the time as well. That's what was happening to me in my lived experience, at least what I was trying to conceptualize. In, you know, this is the same stage in which I started being attacked by entities. So all of this like really dense experience matter started being played out in my perceptual field. But what was actually happening was I had such an incredible like amount of energy that was flowing through my energy body, because I had this dragon birthing through my consciousness, through my soul. It's kind of like it's almost like being like pumped full of light, right? It's going to shoot up like everything that can't handle that density, in a sense. And so I was just experiencing I like a total life collapse. Like everything was melting around me, nothing was making sense. Also my consciousness, the speed at which things were happening, I couldn't keep up with my consciousness. So the only time that I felt normal and things were playing out was when I was in a group of at least 12 people, and it became quite a specific number, because then the constellation, and I actually started doing constellation work, and I highly recommend it to people that are having some really big experiences, because then I could start seeing the parts of consciousness playing out in different forms in different bodies. And so essentially in a group of 12 people, or in a house, or in a community, what was playing out in my consciousness field, because it goes beyond the body, would then play out in my physical environment. And then everything was starting to make at least a little bit of sense. But I was playing out essentially all of those parts of consciousness within one conscious awareness, and it was literally driving me insane. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't function essentially for a while. Basically like a lady in like severe labor, you know, that's just like really dry heaving, and like sometimes like physically as well. I felt like I was literally in labor and not understanding what was going on with me. So it was really terrible experience actually. And I remember, you know, I went for this energy healing, because at that stage I was just really looking for help, and entity extractions and things were all happening at the same time. And I couldn't, like, he asked me like what is going on, and I couldn't place, because it was just everything was going on at the same time. And the moment we'd actually done that, the alignments and removed things, and he like checked in with like higher layers what could be like removed, and things were removed, I came into this level of alignment. And the next morning I woke up and I went into like a kind of like a birthing position, and I felt and I saw this energy like leave my body, and suddenly there was a small black dragon present. I was like, okay. And suddenly everything in my life started like coming back into balance again. And I was like, wow, that was you. Like, you just, excuse my language, but you've been fucking up my life. But the moment it left my system, everything started to rebalance. Like all the karmic patterns started to rebalance themselves. My energy started coming back. In a way, I was grateful, because it like shot everything up, but it like really stole a lot of my physical resources, and my physical body took a lot of damage from it as well. Almost like giving birth, to be honest with you. So it's still been it's been a slow recovery since then. And for a while then I was kind of like, what is this? What do I do with this being? Like, do I have to do anything? Like, is it mine? Like, what is this? What has happened? And it was quite interesting, because I searched it. I searched like, you know, what are like the mythological stories about black dragons, and I engaged with it, but I was also like quite scared of it in another way, even though it came through me. And in Chinese mythology, it's a dragon of vengeance. And I've been on this long understanding of, and at that stage, I'd been through a whole narrative in my physical life as well, where I'd been deeply hurt, and I felt like there needed to be this energetic, like, balancing and understanding the role of revenge on the planet. And at that stage as well, I'd also had one of a guide come in, which was Anubis, which is the Egyptian god, and he helps with So just as a little side plot as well, I got given the name Anuba, which is a feminine aspect of Anubis as an embodiment. And that was a really lovely thing to receive until I understood the depth of what that might mean. Long story short, yeah, so Anubis and Thoth are the ones that basically take souls through into the underworld, and then they have the weighing of the heart with Mart. So they weigh the heart against a feather, and to see if the heart balances or is heavier, then there's like the retribution that happens because of that. And so Anubis had come in. So now I have this black dragon of vengeance, and I've got this death and rebalancing of the scales, and this whole justice thing playing out, and Saturn is doing its thing, and there's a whole lot of things going on. And this is what initiation can sometimes look like, with these big energies that are not there to joke around, and everything is playing out all at once. And it's karma, it's justice, it's ancestral, it's multidimensional. It's it can really be a lot sometimes. And so that's been my understanding, and also understanding, like, on the planet, I soon met someone that was interested in peace dragon work, and understanding that for peace on the planet to exist, sometimes there needs to be a rebalancing of the scales in order for peace to arise. It's not just like, okay, everything's fine now, let's just have peace and all the wars can go away. It's, how does this happen? And so I understood that on the planet, what was needed is actually the dragon of vengeance to come and do this, so that the next wave of peace can then hit. Which is nothing. It's something we don't often want to think about, is that we need this vengeance, but it is a rebalancing, which I think is a really important, important feature. Yeah, so that's, I can go on forever about dragons, but that's been a lot of my experience in the last while.
Mishka, so fascinating. I could literally sit and talk to you about dragons all day long. Yeah, because my experience, I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. It's like, although my experiences with dragons started happening 3 years ago, I almost feel like there's a certain level of maturity that's developing me now to really take these experiences seriously and almost drop into a deeper embodiment with them. I remember about 3 months ago, I kind of sat back and was like, Robyn, you've communicated with dragons, sister. Honor that, honor that about your life and your experiences, and don't dismiss this. So that's been really fascinating to hear. When I was going through that experience, I actually went through a whole year where I felt like I was pregnant. My body, my stomach looked like it was pregnant, and I felt like I was losing my mind. I went to gynecologists, I went to doctors, is there something wrong with me? There was nothing wrong with me. It was, but yeah, I really felt like I was pregnant. And interestingly, that year, I came across quite a few individuals that were in deep phases of initiation who knew what I was talking about. They were experiencing the same thing of actually physically feeling pregnant because of something that they were birthing. So thank you for sharing that. And then just incidentally, I mean, it's so curious because I work with Black Dragon, the first dragon that made himself. There's three dragons that I am in constant communication with that are kind of like in my team. But the primary dragon, his role is protection. So I found that, because they're quite interesting with what you shared about the Dragon of Vengeance.
Yeah, for me, protection and vengeance are part of the same print in a way. It's the same kind of energetic profile. So yeah, I think it's very interesting when we, for me, it's always finding the other side of the coin when I meet people that are engaging in the same beings as me. It's so interesting because sometimes we have the same being but different sides to the same the same energy, because at the end of the day, we're using words to describe this energetic form that's come into our awareness. And it's so interesting to see the different perceptions of that same energy. And of course, makes sense that they'd both be kind of interrelated with each other.
Yeah. So, this is so fascinating because you've had this experience too with this elven part of your soul. And here we are sitting talking about dragons. And so I'd love to just zoom out and just see where this takes us, for the final leg of our conversation. Why? What are the role of these beings in your experience, or why are we having these experiences? What is our relationship with these beings who you and I know exist in form and not just as an energetic imprint. So what are your
Mm.
thoughts on that?
Oof. I've got this recurring joke that I make in a lot of my workshops and circles when I say that the primordial sound of the universe is, I think that it's not Om, I think it's why. Because I
I love
really
that.
think that's like the crux of it is like, why? Like, why is any of this happening? And for me, I have different whys, and it depends on the part of me that I'm embodying in that moment. And that's been part of my journey right now as well, is deciding where to kind of crystallize. And you can look at it from the cosmic perspective, of which it's just the entire universe is looking to unify, and so we're bringing all these aspects of our being into unification, and as many as we can. You can bring it down a layer in terms of soul purpose or bodhisattva, and that would be the path of the one that is here again to help the evolution of humanity from a different lens, and whether that is helping heal the planet, or it's helping, from a galactic perspective, the human race evolve to a point where we can encounter other galactics, or, there's different purpose-led paths around coming back, to, raise the consciousness of the planet, free people from suffering. There's that level of why. There's also the other level of why, where it's like, because we can, and this is all just one big cosmic soup that we're swimming in, and that we're allowed to experience all these beautiful things. And so we might have come in with a bunch of contracts saying that I would like to experience this and this and this and this and this, and let's go to Earth for eco ascension, because this planet is an amazing place to evolve through the ecology of life, of plants, of this form of life and this density, um you know or it's just awakening up to our multidimensional selves from this point of view. There's another point of view in which we are in soul school, and this is a curriculum which is just on Earth, and we require immense density to master certain aspects of our training. And so we've come here just to train for something that we don't even see yet, that's happening on a bigger scale. So there's so many, for me, viewpoints, and for me, it's about what is my why right now. And every being that's come has opened something new for me. And then I've dropped into a deeper level of like, wow, okay, I see. Part of the why that I think I've embodied, over the last little while, especially when I had that journey where I told you I came through as Elaine, and it was the first thing that came out of my mouth was, I'm the mother of the new age. It just came out, and that was like, I didn't even know what that meant. It was such a surreal experience. And of course, that's kind of like unpacked over time with all the birthings that have happened. But yeah, part of that is that we are here to birth a new reality, a collective a version of whatever matrix structure we've been operating through from source, as ultimate creation that is here to create something new. And so we have these people that are in this grid of the architects of the new earth, if you want to give it that label, that are here to help transfer codes for the collective to shift and to move into something greater, because the collective consciousness is ready for a new path. And there's a lot of spirits in different realms that are also part of that evolution and are also evolving into something new. And so we're all co-creating this dance together. So for me, there's so many whys, on the different levels of density and dimensions that we can operate from. But those are some of the ones which have at least floated through my consciousness, and that I kind of resonate with, everywhere from like deeply passionate, this is our purpose on Earth and this is what we're here to do, all the way to it's all just a dance and we're all source anyway. Yeah.
That's such a beautiful answer. And, it drops a remembrance in me of not to take oneself and one's experience too seriously, but at the same time to take one's individuation very seriously. So just such a beautiful way that you've chosen to answer that. And I really just, want to say that there will be some people listening to this who will think that this is quite mad, okay? And that's okay. I think it's still really important that we're having these conversations. And this is why, because there are going to be a lot of people listening to this thinking, thank God, someone is talking about this. Because My own experience, and this is just limited experience, but Mishka, I know you've got the same experience. There are more and more people having these kinds of experiences. And at some stage, there needs to be genuine dialogue around what's happening with self initiation and contact with other forms and races and types of being. And I really believe in my blood and in my bones that more and more of us are moving into deeper trance states, are opening up to more of our multidimensionality. So, even if one is sitting listening to this now thinking this is fantastical, it's been lovely to listen to, but like, what are you two on? It's okay, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and you don't know where your soul is leading you. I mean, ultimately, we just don't know what we don't know. And that's why I think this conversation is so fascinating around where the planet is going. And it's why I ask every single one of my guests what they think. Like, where are we going? And so, Mishka, you've really been so gracious with my very big questions, my very big open-ended questions. And I'm going to lean into that grace just a little bit more with one final question. Where do you think we're going?
It's a good question. And for me, where we're going is at this moment in time, I feel where we are collectively willing to go. And yeah, it's really hard to answer in a like a little concise kind of way. But for me, because I really believe in the sovereign co-creation of the universe, I do believe that the narratives that we're writing and the stories in which we're all going to experience in our own individual matrix structures of reality are going to be guided by the collective consciousness that we're weaving at this time. And so, yes, while I do believe they are archetypal, energies that are floating through humanity, which we're going to be flowing into and working through. You can talk about the phases of humanity, or the phases of evolution of a planet, which we're also moving through. So we can look at it from those lenses in terms of where we're going as a collective in our collective ascension, and we can even go into like the ascension path. But for me, ultimately, I believe that we do have the sovereignty to decide at this time where it is each of us are going to be going and what reality we're going to be filtering into to experience together. And so I can talk about the ones that I hope we're going into. And for that, for me, is the ones in which we're more connected. We're more in a space of unification of our hearts, where we're tapping into that intuitive flow. We're moving into a multidimensional space where things are becoming the norm. The baseline of reality is a new game in which things are a little bit lighter, a little bit easier, a little bit less dense. The lessons are a little bit less dense as well. And our expanded landscape of what we're engaging with is a lot more open. Because I think a lot of us are ready for a new game. We're ready for a new way of being. We're tired of this level of density and looping in the same cycles that we've been going through for some time. But for us to play that next game, that next level, that next stepping out of this level of density, there requires that collective shift. And so for me, it's about grabbing onto the part of the puzzle which you have, embodying your soul imprint, connecting to your intuition, and working in the grid to unpack what that's going to look like. So at this time, I think that there's a lot of us that are like kind of tapping into the same next game you'd say we'd like to play as a collective, and starting to grid that onto the planet so that we can step into that as a collective ascension, debugging the parts of us that are holding on to old narratives and starting to weave in new stories, implanting new seeds of consciousness for us to start growing and nurturing together so that a new reality can be born collectively. And so that's what I feel is happening, and that's the reality that I've decided to step into, and the one that I hopefully invite more people into, is this co-creative dance where we're connecting to our souls, to our hearts, and working with the higher guides to help us evolve into a space that is more fun and free for all of us together. Yeah, and I do. That's where I choose to live and reside. And there's many other stories out there as well, but that's the one I'd like to co-create with you. Yeah.
Sister, that answer is just powerful and beautiful, and it luxuriates in sovereignty. I love it, and I'm going to listen to that again. I really, I really love this ownership of the idea that we are co-creative and we are ready for a new reality. We are ready for a new game. It's like what I said at the beginning of today's episode, is that the soul craves fire. It craves firewalking. It craves transmutation and transition and if you look at nature and all the spiritual laws that, we have there, all the keys and the codes, and the energy of the spiral is that everything is always in motion. Nothing is ever meant to stagnate or to become comfortable. Life itself works on motion. Today has been such an honor chatting to you. And for those of you, all of you, I'm sure, that want more of Mishka, all of her details are below. I also believe that she's going to be starting her own podcast. So we will be tuning in as soon as we can. Thank you so much, sister.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure.